Are you secretly crushing it financially without even realizing it? Or are you part of the struggling masses who think everyone else has their money figured out? The answer might shock you because most Americans have absolutely no clue where they actually stand compared to their neighbors, coworkers, and that guy on Instagram who somehow affords a Tesla on a barista salary. My name is Nick, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time digging through financial data so you don't have to. If you're tired of wondering whether you're doing better or worse than everyone else with money, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button, because today we're pulling back the curtain on exactly what it takes to be in the top 50% of Americans financially. Here's something that's gonna mess with your head. What I tell people the actual numbers for what it takes to be above average in America, half of them think I'm lying, and the other half suddenly feel either way better or way worse about their situation. But here's the thing that makes this whole topic fascinating. Understanding where you stand isn't just about satisfying curiosity or feeding your ego. It's about giving you the information you need to make smarter decisions with your money. Think about it this way. If you're trying to get in better shape, wouldn't you want to know what the average person weighs or how often they exercise? If you're trying to improve at your job, wouldn't you want to know how you compare to other people in your field? Money works exactly the same way. When you understand where you stand compared to everyone else, you can make more informed choices about your spending, saving, and investing. Plus, you'll finally know whether you should be panicking about your finances or actually feeling pretty good about your progress. But before we dive into these eye-opening statistics, let me warn you about something. The numbers I'm about to share with you are going to challenge everything you think you know about what normal looks like in America. Some of these figures might make you feel incredibly relieved about your situation. Others might be a serious wake-up call that forces you to rethink your entire financial strategy. Either way, by the end of this video, you'll have a crystal clear picture of exactly where you stand financially compared to every other American household. So let's start with the big question that keeps most people up at night: income. When you cash that paycheck every couple of weeks, are you earning more or less than the typical American household? According to the most recent data, the median household income in the United States hit $83,730 in 2024. That means half of all American households earn more than this amount, and half earn less. It's the exact middle of the pack. Now, before you start feeling too good or too bad about that number, let me break down what this actually means for your financial position. If your household is bringing in $84,000 or more per year, congratulations. You're officially in the top 50% of American earners. But here's where it gets interesting and honestly a little depressing. To be considered middle class on a national level, your household needs to earn between $53,740 and $161,220 annually. Think about that range for a second. The gap between the bottom of middle class and the top is over $100,000. That's more than the entire median income for most American households. This massive spread shows you just how much income inequality exists in this country, even within what we consider the middle class. But income is just the starting point, and frankly, it's not even the most important number when it comes to your financial position. What really matters is what you do with that money once you earn it. And this is where things get really interesting and honestly pretty concerning for most Americans. Let's talk about net worth, because this is where you'll really discover whether you're ahead of the pack or falling behind. Your net worth is simply everything you own minus everything you owe. Add up your house, your cars, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, and everything else with value. Then subtract your mortgage, credit card debt, student loans, and any other money you owe. Whatever's left is your net worth. The median household net worth in America reached $192,084 in 2023. That's actually a pretty significant jump from $121,411 just 3 years earlier. So if your household net worth is above $192,000, you're officially in the top half of American households by wealth. But here's something that might surprise you about these net worth numbers. They vary dramatically by age, and some of the breakdowns are pretty eye-opening. If you're between 18 and 34 years old, you only need a net worth of $39,040 to be in the top 50% of your age group. That might sound achievable, but remember, this includes everything you own. Your car, your furniture, your savings account, minus your student loans, credit card debt, and any other money you owe. For context, if you're a recent college graduate with $30,000 in student debt, a car worth $10,000 and $5,000 in your checking account, your net worth is negative $15,000. You'd need to either pay down that debt or build up your assets by over $50,000 just to reach the median for your age group. The numbers get more substantial as people get older, which makes sense since they've had more time to build wealth and pay down debt. But even then, the figures might be lower than you'd expect. The median net worth for people aged 35 to 44 is only $91,000. For the 45 to 54 crowd, it jumps to $168,000. People between 55 and 64 have a median net worth of $212,000, and those 65 to 74 hit $212,166,000. Here's what I find fascinating about these numbers. They're actually pretty achievable for most people with decent incomes and some basic financial discipline. You don't need to be a stock market genius or inherit money from a rich relative. You just need to consistently spend less than you earn and invest the difference over time. But there's another side to this story that we need to address, and it's something that affects your day-to-day financial reality right now. We're talking about emergency savings, and the numbers here are honestly pretty alarming. Only 55% of American adults have set aside enough money to cover 3 months of expenses in an emergency fund. Let me repeat that, because it's important. Nearly half of all Americans would struggle to cover their basic living expenses for just 3 months if they lost their income. An additional 15% could potentially cover 3 months of expenses by borrowing money, selling assets, or tapping into other savings. But that leaves 30% of adults who couldn't cover 3 months of expenses by any means. This emergency savings data reveals something crucial about financial well-being that goes beyond just income or net worth. You could be earning 6 figures and have a decent net worth, but if you don't have cash readily available for emergencies, you're still financially vulnerable. This is why understanding these statistics isn't just about comparing yourself to others, it's about identifying potential weaknesses in your financial foundation. The lack of emergency savings becomes even more concerning when you consider what's happening with debt levels across the country. American households are carrying a total of $18.388 trillion in debt. That breaks down to an average of $105,056 per household. Now, that might sound like a massive number, and it is, but here's something that might surprise you. Despite carrying over $100,000 in debt per household, Americans are actually spending a relatively manageable 11.2% of their income on debt payments. That's actually lower than it was during most of the 2000s, which suggests that while we owe more money, we're managing it slightly better than previous generations. But don't let that fool you into thinking everything is fine, because when you dig deeper into the types of debt people are carrying, the picture becomes much more concerning. Credit card debt alone has reached $1.18 trillion nationally, spread across over 600 million accounts. The average household carrying a revolving credit card balance owes $10,815 at interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. Here's what really gets me about credit card debt. Unlike a mortgage where you're buying a house or a car loan where you're purchasing transportation, credit card debt is usually the result of buying stuff that's either sitting in closets, gathering dust, or already thrown away. That $10,000 represents dinners you can't remember, clothes you never wear, and impulse purchases that seemed like a great idea at the time. And if you think student loans are bad, medical debt might be even worse. Americans owe $220 billion in medical debt, and here's the kicker. About 40% of all Americans are carrying some form of medical debt when you include what they've put on credit cards or borrowed from family members. So you could be doing everything right financially, eating rice and beans, driving a 15-year-old Honda, and then boom, you get hit by a medical emergency that wipes out years of careful saving. But let's shift gears and talk about something that's probably affecting your financial position more than you realize. Housing costs. And this is where things get absolutely wild. Over 76% of Americans are spending more than 31% of their gross monthly income on housing. The traditional rule says you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing, but we've apparently decided that rule is more of a suggestion than an actual guideline. More than half of all Americans are spending over 50% of their monthly income just to keep a roof over their heads. Let that sink in for a moment. Half of your paycheck gone before you even think about food, transportation, or anything else. And it gets worse for younger generations. 59% of millennials and 45% of Gen Z are spending over half their income on housing expenses. This housing affordability crisis is absolutely crushing people's ability to build wealth. And here's why. When you're spending 60% of your income on rent or mortgage payments, there's simply nothing left over for emergency savings, retirement contributions, or investing. You're essentially trapped in a cycle where you're working just to afford the privilege of having somewhere to sleep. The numbers are even more depressing when you look at what people can actually afford. According to recent data, 66.6 million households, representing 49% of all American households, cannot afford a $150,000 home. And that's not exactly a mansion we're talking about. In many parts of the country, $250,000 might get you a decent starter home, but in places like California or New York, that's barely a down payment. This housing crisis is creating some seriously weird financial situations. You might have a household earning $90,000 a year, which sounds pretty good, right? That puts you above the median household income. But if you're living in Massachusetts where the median household income is $106,500, suddenly your $90,000 doesn't look so impressive. You're actually below average for your area, and good luck finding affordable housing. Meanwhile, that same $90,000 would make you feel like royalty in Mississippi, where the median household income is only $1,966. You'd be earning double the typical household income, and housing costs would be a fraction of what they are in expensive coastal areas. Geography has become one of the biggest factors in determining your financial position, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. This geographic inequality is creating some interesting strategies for people who understand the game. Remote work has allowed some folks to earn California or New York salaries while living in places like Tennessee or Texas. They're essentially gaming the system by maximizing their income while minimizing their expenses, and honestly, it's pretty brilliant if you can pull it off. But let's get back to retirement savings, because this is where most Americans are really struggling, and the numbers might shock you. The average 401k balance reached record levels in 2024, with some reports showing averages of $137,800 to $148,000. That sounds pretty decent until you realize those are averages, not medians. A few people with massive balances are skewing the numbers upward. The median 401k balance tells a very different story. It's only $38,176. Remember, median means half of all people have less than this amount. So if you've got $40,000 in your retirement accounts, you're actually doing better than half of all Americans with 401k plans. The numbers get more encouraging as people get older, which makes sense since they've had more time to save. People in their 20s have an average 401k balance of $91,000, though the median is much lower at $34,000. By the time people reach their 50s, the average jumps to nearly $600,000 with a median of $252,000. But here's the problem with these retirement savings numbers. Financial experts recommend having at least 15% of your pre-tax income saved for retirement annually, and accumulating 10 times your annual income by age 67. If you're earning $50,000 a year, you should have $500,000 saved for retirement by the time you're ready to quit working. Most people aren't even close to these targets. The situation becomes even more concerning when you consider that 54% of Americans admit to having no retirement savings whatsoever. $0. They're planning to rely entirely on Social Security, which provides an average monthly benefit of about $1,550. That's roughly $18,600 per year, which might cover rent in some areas, but definitely won't fund the retirement lifestyle most people are hoping for. Americans think they need $1.26 million to retire comfortably, which is actually down from $1.46 million the previous year. But thinking you need it and actually having it are two completely different things. The gap between retirement goals and reality is enormous for most households. This brings us to something that might be the most important factor in determining whether you're in the top 50% financially, and it's not what most people think. It's not your income level, your net worth, or even your debt situation. It's your savings rate. How much of your income are you actually setting aside for the future? The personal savings rate in America hit just 4.4% as of late 2024. That means the average American is saving less than 5 cents out of every dollar they earn after taxes, 5 cents. If you're consistently saving 10% or more of your income, you're already ahead of most Americans, regardless of how much you're actually earning. Here's why that 4.4% savings rate is so pathetic. It's almost funny. Your great-grandparents probably saved more money during the Great Depression than most Americans are saving today in one of the most prosperous periods in human history. We've somehow convinced ourselves that we're too broke to save money while simultaneously spending $47 on DoorDash because we're too lazy to make a sandwich. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that separates people who build wealth from people who complain about being broke on Twitter. The top 50% of Americans by financial position aren't necessarily the highest earners. They're the people who figured out the difference between earning money and keeping money. You could be making six figures and still be financially worse off than someone earning $40,000 who actually saves and invests consistently. This is where geography becomes absolutely crucial to understanding your financial position, and the numbers will make your head spin. Remember that Massachusetts household income of $106,000 we talked about? Well, in Massachusetts, you need to earn between $71,000 and $213,000 annually to be considered middle class. So if you're earning $90,000 in Boston, you're technically lower middle class despite making nearly double the national median. Meanwhile, in Mississippi, where the median household income is $44,900, middle class ranges from about $30,000 to about $60,000, $1,000 to $90,000. The same $90,000 salary that makes you struggle in Massachusetts would put you in the upper middle class in Jackson. It's like playing financial roulette based on your zip code. This geographic arbitrage is creating some wild opportunities for people smart enough to recognize it. I know folks who negotiated remote work agreements with San Francisco companies and then moved to places like Austin or Nashville. They're earning California salaries while paying Tennessee rent, effectively catapulting themselves into the top 20% financially overnight. Meanwhile, their former neighbors in San Francisco are spending $3,000 a month for the privilege of having roommates at age 35. But let's talk about something that might be even more important than your current financial position, your financial trajectory. Because here's the thing most people don't realize. Being in the top 50% today doesn't matter if you're heading in the wrong direction, and being below average right now doesn't doom you if you understand what actually drives long-term wealth building. The data shows some fascinating patterns about who moves up and who slides down the financial ladder. People who consistently save at least 10% of their income, regardless of how much they earn, tend to climb steadily up the wealth rankings over time. People who increase their spending every time they get a raise, what economists call lifestyle inflation, tend to stay stuck in the same relative position or even slide backwards despite earning more money. So there you have it. Whether you're crushing it financially or barely keeping your head above water, At least now you know exactly where you stand compared to everyone else. Use these numbers as motivation, not as an excuse to panic or get complacent. Your financial future depends on what you do next, not where you started.